Hello, I'm Nancy Dubler, and I'm an attorney with a special interest in people who live in nursing homes. As we all know, living in a nursing home can mean giving up a good deal of independence, but it should never mean giving all of it up. There are certain rights which nursing home residents continue to have, and which, by law, should be respected, honored, and supported by you. I will be talking to you now about some of these rights and how they can be protected by introducing you to two nursing home residents. The first is perfectly capable of making decisions for herself about all aspects of her life, including her health care now and in the future. The second is no longer able to make decisions, but has the right to have decisions made for her which are in her best interest. Both women live at Kingsbridge Heights Nursing Home and Manor in New York City, where the administration and staff formed an ethics committee to help them identify and better protect the rights of their residents. As you will see, an ethics committee does not make decisions, but rather reviews and discusses complicated cases, helps everyone to understand the rights of residents and family members, and assists the nursing home to write policy guidelines. Erna Newman is 85 years old and a widow. Her only child died when he was very young, and she has no other family. In the last few years, she has been hospitalized several times. Now she has decided to leave instructions about how much medical care she will accept if she should become so sick that she can no longer tell the doctors herself what she wants. She turned to staff members to help her make out a living will, one way of making decisions for the future. Tanya is her social worker, and Charmaine, the nursing director of the manor. They want to be certain that Mrs. Newman understands the decisions she is making.
When did you come to the United States?
In 1940, from the French concentration camp.
Oh.
But my husband was lucky. After 5 months, he could come to the United States, and then he sent me everything that I needed.
And then you joined him
And
here?
then I came here.
In the 40s, you said?
1940, yes, in February.
And what did you work, you and your husband, when you came to New York? What did you...
I was a concert and opera singer.
A concert and opera singer?
Yes.
Very interesting life. Tell me a little bit about your opera singing.
I sang Madame Butterfly, I sang Mimi, and
Beautiful role.
made me happy, yes.
How is your life here, Kingsbridge Heights?
I was very happy and very grateful to America that we were able to come. And I had a fulfilled life. I did different things. Unfortunately, my dear husband died after only 25 years of marriage. It was an outstandingly
Some people don't
good
even have
marriage.
that much. That's wonderful.
And I'm here now since nearly 8 years in the Kingsbridge Heights Manor, and I am happy to be here. I like it here.
Then the conversation turned to her decision to make a living will.
Now, what made you come to this decision for your life? And how...
When I heard about it the first time, I was very much impressed. And I said, this is wonderful to be able not to have a life that is meaningless because you are so sick that you will not recuperate again. And you can say it before you get sick, and you tell what you want.
Do you understand each and every statement in the living will itself about
I do.
what will be done and what, well, you tell me what you know about it.
I do not want cardiac resuscitation.
Yes,
I do not want mechanical respiration.
yes.
I do not want tube feeding.
Well, that, we talked about the tube feeding in
Yes.
length.
Yes.
But the mechanical respiration, you understand what that means?
Oh, yes.
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 Can you tell us a little
Tell us
bit?
a
What
little
does
bit
that
about
mean,
it.
mechanical respiration?
My lungs wouldn't work anymore by themselves.
Yes,
And a machine would take over.
yes. It's a very good explanation of what it is. Okay.
Thank you.
Mrs. Newman,
Yes.
are you confident that those of us here who take care of you, are going to be able to carry out your wishes?
Absolutely. I love that place. I live here since nearly 8 years. The nurses are wonderful, and so are the doctors. So I'm confident that they will do what has to be done.
Mrs. Newman has made important decisions about the medical care she wants if she can no longer speak for herself. By signing a living will, she has exercised her right to consent to or refuse medical care. She and every one of us has this right, so long as we are capable of making decisions. Now that Mrs. Newman has made the decisions, the question is, will her wishes be respected? Mrs. Newman is confident, but Tanya and Charmaine are uncertain how to protect her wishes. They turned to the Ethics Committee for guidance.
Mrs. N is an 85-year-old lady who lives in the manor. She has been a resident there for the past 8 years. She has had multiple hip fractures. She has had cataract surgery, and she also has heart disease. She expressed to us just recently her desire to write a living will. And Tanya and I and Dr. Essman, we have discussed it with her at length. My concern in bringing up Mrs. N is I know that I will protect her decision-making while she is a resident in the manor. My concern is if she goes to the hospital, how do I protect that decision-making of hers when she's no longer a patient in the manor?
She has no family members in the community
Or able
to
to-
advocate for her.
No family members. Could you tell us a little about her mental status or her capacity for decision-making? I think that's a key element if we're talking about what she understands.
Well, she's fully capable of making her own decisions. She is completely alert and oriented and quite articulate, an intelligent woman. So at this point in her life, she is, without a doubt in my mind, able to make a decision about what ought to happen to her when she no longer has that ability.
Anybody else have any background? Connie?
Has she gotten very friendly with anybody else? Perhaps you said she doesn't have relatives, but maybe she has close friends or other people who she can count on to make sure that her wishes would be respected should something happen to her.
Yes. She does have close friends, but she has not relinquished any decision-making to any friend. She wants to be able to make decisions for herself, and she has not had anyone appointed guardian or conservator or anything like that.
Nancy?
Would there be someone who might be close enough to her, some friend who she might be willing to appoint her proxy?
She does say that she has very close and supportive friends. She still wants to be the person who makes choices for herself.
She's an unusual woman.
Yes.
She's 85. She's meticulously dressed.
Yes.
She left Austria in 1939, just ahead of the Nazis, got to France, left France in 40, just ahead of the Nazis, and came to the United States. And in many ways, she's European, but an American. She's a very unusual woman, very alert. And I'm sure she's intellectually capable of the subtlest kind, don't you think so, Julie? Of decisions. And I think you're right. If we can get a friend on the same wavelength with her, that would cover the hospital possibility.
I think we should clarify one point here before going on. Is there a potential for conflict between the person, what might be said by the person who speaks for you and what your living will says? And further, why do we need the one if we have the other?
I think what Charmaine is concerned about is that there is somebody there to be responsible, like a watchdog for when she goes to the hospital, to make sure that these things are carried out according to Mrs. N's wishes.
I would ask her too, if she feels there's anybody in the facility, she would be comfortable enough being her proxy or her surrogate or whatever we are going to call it, to see what she wants that it should be fulfilled.
I think you need to emphasize to her not so much that we're looking for a proxy, in a sense somebody to substitute for her, but somebody to back her up, to back up what she has already said.
An advocate.
An
Yes, that's what I
right,
really mean.
right.
I mean,
Something that I'd like
not
to
really surrogate.
get clarified, a concern that the living will cannot anticipate everything that might happen to Mrs. N, which I think, first of all, does Mrs. N know this? Is she aware that however detailed, whatever exquisite detail we put in the living will, I mean, there might be some circumstances that we can't anticipate. She should have that information so that she can decide for herself whether she wants a proxy and how that proxy will act for her if need be.
I think that's very important, that even though her desires are very clear, I think it's our obligation to explain to her that in the vast number of things that happen when you happen to be ill and in the hospital, there may be some event or some decision that isn't covered precisely. And so even though she has rejected the concept of a surrogate or proxy until now, I wonder if we've approached her in that way, that in addition to the specific things that she said, that we hope we will find some way to advocate.
Nobody can be there 24 hours a day. No. Obviously, it's the person from the nursing home who's most familiar with that person, who is going to be on the scene at the hospital, who is going to be the advocate for that person without building yet another structure.
I think that there has to be someone who feels the responsibility to be involved in decisions in the hospital and to continuously put her wishes as expressed in that will in front of caregivers.
You know, if Mrs. N is to go to a hospital tomorrow, and if she is to become unconscious, and if I know of her being artificially fed or kept artificially alive, I would be the first one to get copies of these and spread it to the newspapers if I have to. My concern is, will I have any power? You know, I am her social worker in a nursing home. She will at that point be under the care of a hospital. I am afraid of the structure out there. Will people hear me?
Who has the power?
Someone who is her official proxy.
When it comes to
That's
that.
That's what I'm saying.
That's one of the reasons, it seems to me, to explain to her that if she really cares about what's in the living will, that she might want to appoint someone, her specific proxy, to carry out those wishes, because that person will have power and standing.
That's what I'm saying
So I
all
think
the
that's
time.
important.
So Nancy, what you're saying is that we ought to go back to Mrs. N and broach the subject, letting her know that we do not wish to take her autonomy away from her, but to be there as a support, as her family, if you will. I mean, she has used that statement that she considers the people who work here and the facility her family.
The committee struggled to find a way to ensure that Mrs. Newman's wishes will be honored. Maybe she will appoint someone to carry out her wishes. But even if she doesn't, it is clear that the staff at Kingsbridge will support her decisions to the best of their abilities. Mrs. Newman is lucky to be in a place where the staff is so aware of her rights and the need to protect them, and that the law clearly empowers proxies. In some parts of the country, the power of healthcare agents is not so clear, and some nursing home residents, in addition, may have difficulty finding someone to appoint. Despite these problems, as staff of a nursing home, you should be aware that residents have a legal right to leave directions about their health care in the future. So long as they are capable of making decisions, they may write down their wishes, appoint someone they trust, often called a healthcare agent, to make those decisions, or do both. Write down their wishes and appoint a healthcare agent. If a resident uses a form provided by the state or by an organization, urge him to personalize it so that it reflects his wishes. Please check your study guide for more information. Rosa Rhodes is also a widow. She, too, lost her only child, but just 2 years ago. Unlike Mrs. Newman, Mrs. Rhodes is no longer able to make decisions for herself. She never did make her wishes known about how she would want to be treated if she became sick, nor did she ever appoint anyone to decide for her when she could no longer do so. Now she needs a hearing aid. Her nephew, who is her closest relative and manages her money, is reluctant to approve the purchase of a new hearing aid. The staff is concerned and referred Mrs. Rhodes' situation to the Ethics Committee. The immediate question was whether Mrs. Rhodes should get a new hearing aid. But the need for a hearing aid is just one of the many health care decisions which will have to be made for her in the future. Before the meeting, I met with her nephew, Mr. Moody, who takes responsibility for her care. He brought up the question of the hearing aid himself. Before she came here, when you used to visit with her, did you ever talk about health care problems or decisions or what she would want if she were sick?
Be truthful, no.
Had she been healthy most of her life, physically healthy?
Physically healthy, and as long as I've been knowing her, she hadn't been sick at all.
So she had no physical problems that led her to think about health care issues?
The only thing that I found that was bothering was her hearing. I bought her a hearing aid and found out that she had it maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks. She cut the thing up.
She cut it up?
Yes. I was asked by the social care to get her another one, but I said if I bought her another one, who's going to be responsible for it?
Well, I bet, do you think there's someone here who could help her with it? Because if she's not hearing well, that might make her more isolated, don't you think?
Well, it's kind of hard to say, you know, damn if you do, damn if you don't.
But I wondered, don't you think that since she's her being in touch with the world is a hard problem for her.
Oh, like
don't you think it might help her more to have one?
She said that none of them work anyway, and sometimes you hear without the hearing aid.
Because that's interesting. She did want a hearing aid at one point.
At one point she wanted, and now she don't want it because like she fools around with it. She cuts it on and off, and
yeah. I think my understanding is it's very hard with Alzheimer's patients to get the hearing aid tuned right, since they often can't
be implemented. I think Francine has a case to present to us now of a patient without capacity, and as I think we've been led to understand, a patient who had never expressed clearly what she would want. Can you tell us about this case, Francine?
Yes. This is a case of Mrs. R., who is 80 years old, who through various losses of family, husband, sisters, people that she lived with up until about 3.5 years ago, are no longer alive. When she was living alone, a nephew of hers began to look in on her, and he started to cook and do more shopping for his aunt. Eventually, she needed to be hospitalized because physically she wasn't doing so well, and mentally also. Eventually, she wound up in our nursing home and is diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. She's very confused. She wanders around the floor, makes inappropriate verbal responses. And her nephew at this point is the prime person to make decisions for her.
What decisions has he made so far on her behalf? Have there been any medical decisions or health-related decisions that he actually has made for her so far?
At this point, there has not been any that needs. Do you know of any, Shirley,
Well,
specific?
This lady, Mrs. R, is hard of hearing. She wore a hearing aid prior to coming to the nursing home.
Yeah,
Apparently, the
actually, yes.
hearing aid is lost. It lost between home or,
Yes.
I think she came to us from Greasy Square, between home and Greasy Square Hospital. She does need a hearing aid because she's walking around. She wants to talk. She wants to communicate with people. And I think if she has that hearing aid, she will be able to do that. And he says she doesn't need it.
Well, yes, that was a decision that he made because he feels she may lose it. Supposedly, it was lost when she was hospitalized, and it is a costly item.
What do you know about this nephew? What role has he played in his aunt's care, in decisions? Has he been distant or has he been close? Has he been supportive? Has he been, I mean, a little more to fill out the background.
Today's the first day I've seen this nephew. I've spoken to him on the phone, but today's the first time I have seen him. I've seen his wife. She brought her some, I think it was Mother's Day I saw his wife visiting. She brought him some lovely dresses, and that's about it. It's the involvement of this family I don't think is that much.
In my short discussion with him, I felt that he's only a short time involved, maybe a year or so, or 2 years, but not really involved, and that he does not know too much of her background.
I feel that, well, without the hearing aid, I feel it interferes with her daily activities because, for one, as Francine pointed out, she gives inappropriate response. Now, if she could hear, I feel, because if you speak into, I can't remember if it's the right ear or the left, but whichever one, and if she hears you, she will answer. So I feel the hearing aid issue is very important just for her whole lifestyle being in the nursing home because she just cannot hear.
And that's a quality of the life issue, period. I mean,
It occurred to me that to a certain extent, when we don't know what the resident or patient would necessarily want herself, who should be determining what's in her best interest?
We really can't consider what the nephew's feelings are in this matter. The nursing home has certain responsibilities that they must fulfill. And if she needs a hearing aid, then the nursing home has to move for her to get it.
We have a big problem with patients that have hearing aids. They don't often wear them, and they're lost. And time again, the question is how many hearing aids should they have until we decide not to? You know, that's what he did mention that to me. What if we get her a hearing aid and she loses it again? Can you guarantee she won't lose it? Can you guarantee she'll wear it?
Well, Francine, the answer to the question, how many? 2 isn't too many. If there's a series of losses or failures to wear it, then I think that question may come up later on.
She's in the home, and the people all around it that work with it know more about her condition than the nephew.
So you're actually adding an additional factor to best interest. It's who knows this patient best.
Yes.
And in fact, if the family member has not been visiting or is not a regular visitor and the nursing home staff who cares for her on a daily basis knows her better, I think your suggestion is they may be in a better position to ascertain the patient's interest or best interest.
I think we should be given a chance to try this lady with an hearing aid. We don't know what happened to her before. We don't have enough history on this lady. We know she had an hearing aid before. What happened to it, we don't know.
She may be confused and disoriented in some way, but here's a lady who remembers a lot about herself, of what she did. She cooked, took care of flowers. She remembers a lot of things about her life. All you have to do is talk in her ear. Her address, where she used to live, everything.
I'm very struck in the conversation by what seems to me to be the unanimous decision of people around the table that this is a woman who should have a hearing aid. When that happens, do we have a clear way of bringing that unanimity of decision to the family member and saying, we know what your decision is, but we think it's wrong, and we'd like you to reconsider? And then if the family member doesn't reconsider, what is the next step?
I feel very clear after meeting the nephew today in my office that maybe if somebody of authority like Dr. Esman or myself would have told him we need that, we want and need that hearing aid for his aunt, he would agree.
I'd like to add that I had the opportunity to spend some time talking with this nephew recently, and I found him very compelling in the way he talked about his relationship with his aunt, and indeed that he did have her best interest at heart, and I'll give 2 examples. I think his reluctance to buy another hearing aid comes from the fact that a number have been lost, and indeed one of them, in her confusion, she actually cut up. So I think his reluctance to buy another hearing aid is understandable, and my sense is that if the staff made it very clear to him that they felt this was necessary for her to function to her maximum, that he would agree. But to bring it to the issue of general healthcare decision-making, we did talk about what he would want for his aunt. And he discussed how she had wanted to live and was a fighter, and he would want everything done for her if she was to become sick. And therefore, I am pretty comfortable as a starting point with thinking about this person as an appropriate decider for her should she become ill in the future. So that's just my sense that perhaps we can now support or contradict by other people's experience.
I have that sense of him also. I mean, the hearing aid issue was the first piece of resistance that I got from him. I have seen him more times than you have, Shirley. And I wasn't that uncomfortable yet that he was not looking out for her best interests. As I said, he reported information about...
Whether Mrs. Rhodes gets a hearing aid may not seem to you to raise complicated ethical issues. But the principles involved here apply to all healthcare decisions, including matters of life and death. In addition, a hearing aid, like glasses and dentures, determines to a great extent the resident's quality of life. Mrs. Rhodes' situation is not unusual. Many residents of nursing homes are no longer capable of making decisions for themselves. More often than not, like Mrs. Rhodes, they did not plan ahead and have not left instructions about their medical care. In these situations, if family members are involved and caring, you, as nursing home staff, should consult with them in making decisions. But if you disagree with the decision of the family, what happens next? By custom, care providers turn to families to make decisions for their incapacitated relatives. Despite the fact that in most states there is no clear legal foundation for these decisions. Both medical ethics and the law, however, require that these decisions be made in keeping with prior personal views if known, and always in the best interest of the resident. Most of the time, family and staff agree on what to do. If, however, you as staff disagree with the family's decision, you have the duty to stand up for the rights of the resident. In Mrs. Rhodes' case, the staff felt strongly that she should get a new hearing aid. Her nephew felt it would be a waste of money. This disagreement may well be resolved once the staff explains to Mr. Moody just how necessary they think the hearing aid will be.
We have a full agenda.
In the cases of Mrs. Newman and Mrs. Rhodes, you saw the Ethics Committee trying to grapple with specific problems. At nursing homes, where the administration encourages open discussion, an Ethics Committee can be a valuable advocate for residents' rights. But an ethics committee is only one way to identify and support residents' rights. The Quality Assurance Committee in the nursing home may be another way, and the Resident and Family Care Conference yet another. None of these, however, substitute for ongoing discussions among the resident, the family, and you as members of the staff. I hope you have enjoyed meeting Mrs. Newman and Mrs. Rhodes. Did they remind you of people you know? They do represent two kinds of residents in nursing homes: those who can make decisions for themselves and those who cannot. Remember, residents who can make decisions have the legal right to leave instructions for future health care, to appoint someone they trust to make decisions for them, or to do both, to leave instructions and to appoint an agent. Remember, too, those residents who cannot make decisions also have the right to have decisions made in their best interest. As staff members, be certain that you have presented the facts to the family. Disagreements often occur because the family does not have all the necessary information to make an informed decision. If you are part of the decision-making process, first question whether the resident has any prior preferences which might be important to consider. If no one knows of any preferences, you must try, with the family, to determine the resident's best interest. You are her advocate and must always speak out in her behalf. Please don't forget your study guide. It has valuable information about healthcare decision-making. Thank you so very much for joining me.